In the name of God. So, this is the first class in your basic immunology course. And this course, as I mentioned yesterday in your orientation session, has a critical place in your first semester's education because it provides you with the basic knowledge that you need to continue to the rest of your education for your basic immunology. And I know that you guys have done immunology courses in your undergraduate studies, but just to be on the safe side and to be sure that you have sufficient knowledge for immunology and you can continue with other courses like infectious disease immunology, immunohematology and blood banking, immunotherapy and immunopathology, which are courses that you will be taking in the following semesters. We decided to offer you this course. So as you're seeing in here, there will be lectures and there will be paper discussions. So the way that courses are done in here is that depending on the number of credit hours, so you will have proportionate number of classes. So for each credit hour, it's 7 to 8 classes. So if it's a 1 credit hour, it will be 7 class plus the exam. If it's 2 credit hours, it's usually 14 classes plus the exam. If it's 3 credit hours, it's 24 classes plus the exam. But sometimes we might decide that, okay, well, one of the classes like the review and discussion that you have here at session 8, it might need to take a bit longer. So it might be assigned like 2 sessions for that specific topic. So that will be decided by the course coordinator. And Dr. Sultan Tuya, who was here yesterday, she is the course coordinator. So what I'm going to do today is introduction to immunology. And I know that all of you have some basic knowledge about immune system. Nonetheless, we decided to do this because there are some concepts that I need to explain in this class, and that those concepts, being familiar with them, will help us with the rest of the course. So, immunology, as you know, is the study of the immune system. And in an immunology course or an introduction to immunology class, I should logically start by explaining immune system, which is a set of organs and tissues and cells and molecules which is responsible for generating immune response. Nonetheless, I don't want to start this class and this course by explaining the structure and function of immune system. I will get to that a bit later. I want to start this course and this class by explaining a concept which does not directly relate to immunology or even biological sciences, but it has its roots in philosophy of science. And for that reason, I have selected this painting which shows the School of Athens. And at the center of the figure, you see two people who have had central roles in philosophy. Any idea who are these two people? Aristotle and so this is a very nice painting. It's from a 16th century Italian painter named Raphael, who was a pupil of Leonardo da Vinci. And it's a very interesting painting, and many figures who've been influential in the history of thought have been depicted here. So these two people at the center, as you mentioned, the younger guy is Aristotle, and the older one is his master, is Plato. So Aflatun and Aristotle, Plato and Aristotle. But there are many other figures in here that sometimes I explain it for students in the beginning of the class, like this woman in here who was an influential woman named Hypatia. She lived in Egypt, and her father was the head of the library of Alexandria, which was a very big library at the time, and many other people in here, including this, I think, is Archimedes. This is Euclid. And two people in here are Parmenides and Heraclitus. So these two people are pre Socratic philosophers. One of them believed that the world is one constant, unchanging entity. So that was Parmenides, who is depicted here. And whatever feeling of movement that we have is just an illusion. There is no movement in the world. And in a completely opposite view, Heraclitus believed that everything is in movement. So there is nothing being constant in this world. Everything is in movement. So these two sort of diametrically opposed views about movement, one of them considering that movement is just an illusion, and the other one believing that anything that feels to be constant, that is an illusion. Everything is in motion, sort of sets the stage for later developments in physical sciences. They both what? In a sense, both of them are right. In a sense, both of them are right. So, from one point of view, everything is in motion. From another point of view, you can consider things constant. So, yeah, very, very interesting ideas that were brought forward by them. So, I want to start this course by explaining the concept which belongs to philosophy of science. And that concept is how can we acquire knowledge? How can we acquire knowledge about the world? So philosophical questions are roughly divided to two main areas. One of them is called metaphysics, and I always encourage all postgraduate students to read philosophy, even though you're going to major in immunology or maybe biochemistry or genetics or whatever field that you have in mind. It's always necessary to read philosophy because philosophy is a branch of human knowledge that answers foundational questions. It answers or it tries to answer foundational questions. And considering that you're at the beginning of your master's program, uh, actually, this advice might be noteworthy. So, reading philosophy has two advantages. One is that, well, it's a branch of human knowledge that deals with foundational questions like what is existence? What categories of existence are there? Is there only matter or there are non-material entities? Does the world or the universe or cosmos has a beginning or it has been going on forever? Does it have an end or it's going to continue forever? And so these are all questions that are subsumed under the title metaphysics. The other major area in philosophy is called epistemology. Epistemology. And by the way, Muslim philosophers, even though we usually think of Greek philosophers as the founders of philosophy, well, that might have been the case, but Muslim philosophers have played a crucial role in development of philosophy. And actually, there is one guy in here. There is one guy in here. This one, uh, who is a Muslim philosopher. Uh, Let me just be sure. School of Athens. Yeah, yeah. So, group of Averroes or Ibn Rushd. So we had four major figures in Andalusia. One of them was Averroes or Ibn Rushd, who was basically a major figure in philosophy, theology, as well as medicine, astronomy, and physics. And many other people, like Ibn Sina, who is usually known for his book Canon of Medicine. He was also a philosopher at the same time. In a sense, yes. So we know him for his work Canon of Medicine. And this is a book that was, after the printing industry became available in Europe, the first book that was printed was Bible. The second book was Canon of Medicine because of his influence on medieval, basically, medical sciences. But anyways, so one major branch of philosophy, it's called metaphysics. Systematic study of general and fundamental questions concerning topics like existence, reason, knowledge, value, mind, and language. So, the part that deals with existence, what is existence, what are categories of existence, what kind of things exist, Do non-material things exist? Do souls exist? So from a theological point of view, from a religious point of view, we believe that souls exist. So after material life terminates, the existence of the being does not terminate, at least for human beings. So there is a soul. But this is looking at it from a philosophical point of view, not from a religious point of view. So these are ontological questions. But another group of questions in philosophy are called epistemological questions. Epistemology, epistemology. So what is the Arabic word for epistemology? We have five Arabic speaking people in here. So epistemology is the branch of philosophy that examines the nature, origin, and limits of knowledge. How can we acquire knowledge about the world around us? So a major sub-branch of metaphysics is called ontology. Ontology. So it comes from ontus, means existence. Existence. So ontology, let me write it down here. What kind of things there are? Ontology. What kind of things there are? Ontology. What is it to be? What kinds of things exist? But epistemology means how do or are we able to know about them, about things which exist? And how can, if the answer to the first question is yes, how can we know about them? And this has been the central epistemology. This has been the central question of modern philosophy since Descartes. So epistemology, let me see what is the Arabic word for it. So the Farsi word is ma'rifat shanasi, which is an Arabic word in here, or shanakht shanasi. But in Arabic, let me find out. Al-Arabi.
Yeah, we took philosophy in high school.
نظرية المعرفة. Okay, very good. Okay. نظرية المعرفة. So it's a theory of knowledge. How can we acquire knowledge? And in the beginning, when you think about philosophy, it seems sort of uh, obvious that, okay, what is it to be? Well, things are there, we can see them. So why do we need to define the meaning of existence? Or what kind of things exist? What kind of things exist? Well, all different sorts of things exist. Material things exist. We have solids, we have fluids, we have gases, we have stars, we have human beings, we have material entities, and then we have things which are not material. And that originates from a religious view about the world. But they're not that easy to answer. So when you enter the question and when philosophers discuss them, they're not very easy to answer. And there are many, I strongly encourage you in the beginning of your master's program to read philosophy. And in the past, well, the book that really helped me to gain an insight about philosophy was Sufi's Word. Sufi's Word. So, Sufi's Word. So it's a book. Usually, well, it's encouraged high school students or undergraduate students in their late teens or early 20s to read it, but anybody can read it. I was much older when I read it. And it's a Norwegian writer, Josephine Garder, who's written a book about Sufi's world, and it has nothing to do with Sufism or things like that. Sufi is the name of a Norwegian girl who's interested to learn about the world and cosmos and things which are around her. And she meets a philosophy teacher, and then it's that their stories. So he starts explaining philosophy from ancient Greece all the way to modernism and postmodernism. It's a very interesting book. But there are some very, very nice uh, channels on YouTube, including this one, Philosophy Overdose. Philosophy Overdose. So it's a very, very interesting channel. So YouTube is filtered in Iran, but you can find ways to get around it. And another one which I which I really like, it's called Philosophy Vibes. Philosophy Vibes. My keyboard has some issues with letters B and M. Philosophy Vibes. Philosophy Vibes. And another one which has been apparently generated using AI by some young Muslims, I think in UK. It's called Attic Books. This one is very interesting. Attic Books. Attic Books. YouTube channel. So it's usually two philosophers discussing issues with each other. And it's very interesting. So on one side, you see a Muslim philosopher like Averroes. On the other side, you see a European philosopher like Kant. And then they discuss different issues with each other. So it's a very interesting one. So yeah, I strongly encourage you to read about it. So the question of epistemology, how can we know about things? How can we know about things? So there has been two answers to this question. One has been through reason or reasoning, and the other one has been through observation. And actually, these two figures that you see here, Plato and Aristotle, are kind of advocates of each of these two ways of acquiring knowledge. So Plato was kind of a exactly person who was later called rationalist. Rationalist. So rationalists believe that you need to use reason and deduction in order to acquire knowledge about the world. So Plato he was kind of a mathematician himself. So deduction and reasoning is the way that mathematicians use to generate knowledge about the world. So if I have a triangle, and I want to prove that the sum of the angles in a triangle are 180 degrees. So the way that I use is basically reasoning and deduction. So you start from a set of axioms, which are Euclidean geometry's axioms, and then you draw a line something like this, and then you draw another line something like this, and then you prove that this angle is basically equal to this angle is equal to this one, and then all three of these angles, when they are added together, they end up being 180 degrees. So this is pure deduction. You have not done any observations. You have not gone outside of this building, finding triangles, measuring their angles and adding them up. So this is purely deductive. So rationalists, including Plato and people who came after him, they believed that reason should be used to acquire knowledge about the world like what mathematicians do. But Aristotle and people who came after him, they believed that you have to do empirical studies, empiricism or empiricists. So they believe that, well, reason is important, reason is important, but observation and experimentation is more important. So that was Aristotle. Aristotle. So these people were called empiricists. Empiricists. And well, they did not identify themselves as rationalists or empiricists, but later they were labeled like that. And after Descartes, people came, three of them, as you're seeing in this slide, three of them, Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz, were the major figures in rationalism, but like Berkeley and Hume were major empiricists. So this guy, Descartes, was French, Spinoza was kind of Dutch, Leibniz was German, but all these three people were British. So sometimes it's called continental rationalism, referring to the continent of Europe, versus British empiricism, And later Kant, Immanuel Kant, he analyzed the views and ideas of empiricists and rationalists, and he came to the conclusion that, well, neither one of the approaches is completely right, so you need to use a combination. And of course, people before him had this idea that you need to use a combination too, but they were giving more weight to one or the other. So Kant said that no, okay, you cannot give more weight to either reason or observation. You have to use them in a consecutive way. So you have to reason and do observation, and reason and do observation. And that gave rise to what is today, what is named scientific method. Scientific method. So scientific method is basically the result of millennia of discussions about whether to use reason or observation, and culminated in the understanding that you need to use both. So our story starts in here. Okay, so I am going to use scientific methods. I am going to use scientific method to acquire knowledge about the world. The point, though, is that the world that we see around us is very complex. So from supergalactic, so these are galaxies, galactic clusters, from the level of galaxies all the way to solar systems and organisms and cells and molecules and atoms, or even elementary particles, quarks, you see complexity everywhere. What is it to be complex? Well, an entity is complex when it's composed of parts, and its parts are composed of parts, and its subparts are composed of parts, and you have a set of interacting components together that give rise to this entity. That is complexity. And in biology, we are here. We talk about organisms and their tissues and cells and molecules. So we have a high level of complexity. Even in here, we have complexity, even at the level of atoms and elementary particles, which are assumed to be the smallest parts of this universe, we have complexity. So let alone at this level, we have a high level of complexity. So scientific methods should tell us how to study complexity. And when we talk about immune system, of course, it's a complex entity. So it has many, many different parts. So how to study a complex entity? So this is what I want to explain for you. I am using this picture of different tiles with different shapes and colors as a sort of a schematic representation of a complex entity. So this is not really the subject of science. It could be a subject of art, but it would do for our example in here. So how can I study complex entities like this? In history of science, there has been two approaches for doing this. One is that, okay, I look at this whole thing. Well, it's too complex to study, so I break it to smaller parts. I break it to smaller part, like this part and this part and this part. And those smaller parts, well, they are less complex, so they are more amenable to studies. I can even break these smaller parts to even smaller parts. So I continue breaking it down to parts until I reach a level of simplicity as opposed to complexity, which is easy for me to understand and study. So that's the way I go. So I break it into smaller segments, study those smaller segments, and then when I study these smaller segments, I put the knowledge that I have acquired at that level to understand the higher level, and then put knowledge that I have acquired at this level to understand the whole thing. So that's one way to go. Make it smaller, study smaller things, try to understand the whole. This approach has been the dominant approach in the history of science for the last 500 years at least. The other approach is completely opposite to that. Holism. You do not break it into smaller parts. You try to understand it as a whole, or even more than that. You consider that this thing might be a part of a bigger whole. This is completely opposed to that previous approach. So try to understand it in its entirety, or try to understand it even as a part of a bigger entity. So this approach, it has been called reductionism, because it uses reduction. It reduces a bigger thing to a smaller thing. Do you want to open the door just to have that was connected? But this one, as you mentioned, it's called holism. We'll check it out. And these two approaches have been used in the history of science. This has been the dominant approach in the history of science, at least for the last 500 years. The dominant prevailing approach in science, both in physical sciences and in life sciences. So empirical sciences or natural sciences. Natural sciences, so we have three branches of science. It's called formal sciences, natural, natural sciences, and what is the third one? So formal sciences, mathematics, it's logic, it's different branches. So even statistics, which is part of mathematics, or even theoretical computer science is called it's part of formal science.
Philosophical sciences? Would we say philosophical sciences?
Okay, so philosophy, I'll put no, philosophical sciences are not a branch, it's one of the sub branches. So I'll put philosophy there too. So the third branch is called social sciences. Social science, and some people social science and humanities. Humanities. And for philosophy, some people place it in here, some people place it in here. So because these are the ones that use deduction mostly for acquiring knowledge. These ones, natural sciences, are the ones that use observation as their primary tool. And these ones use a combination of both. So social sciences, in a sense, are part of natural sciences because sociology, because we have sociology in here, we have psychology in here, we have politics in here, even economics is here, But natural sciences, that is our area, it's divided into physical sciences and life sciences. So physical sciences deals with the inanimate part of the universe, but life sciences deals with living part of the universe. So natural sciences kind of considered equivalent to empirical sciences. So in empirical sciences, there has been two approaches. Reductionism has been the dominant approach, both in physical sciences and natural sciences. But holism has been sort of the dominated approach. It has not been the dominant approach. It has been difficult to study things as a whole. And if you look at the program that we have for you here, after this introduction to immunology, the second class is cells and organs of immune system. Then we have antigens and antibodies, which are important molecules in immune system and their interactions. Cytokines, which are again molecules produced by leukocytes. Then we have innate immunity and inflammation, complement system, MHC and antigen presentation. These are again molecules. T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, these are cells, and then we move on to the rest of the stuff. So if you look at this program, is this program taking a reductionist approach or a holistic approach?
Reductionist.
It's a reductionist approach. And it's pretty much the same thing for the rest of the classes that you're going to have. Even the book, which is the reference book, which Dr. Mohammadi might have given you that. So or let me write it this way. So Abul Abbas Immunology, it's named Cellular and Molecular Immunology. So even from the title of the book, we can understand that it's going to take a reductionist approach, which is fine because that's the way that we've acquired most of our knowledge about immune system. So before looking at tissues and looking at cells and molecules, which kind of started in the second half of the 20th century, our knowledge of immune system was very, very limited. So we knew that there is an entity inside our bodies that protects us against injurious stimuli or injurious entities. But in order to really find it and use it, we had to discover antibodies, and then T cells and B cells and cytokines and MHC and all those things. So the knowledge that we acquired, the knowledge that as a whole biologists acquired about immune system was highly dependent on this approach. So you had to break it down to smaller parts to understand it. It was not understandable as a whole. But what I'm going to do today in this class, because the rest of the thing is going to be reductionist, I will try to give you a holistic view of the immune system. So that would be nice to try to understand the immune system as a whole. It's not an easy task because I've been trained with the reductionist school. The books have been written with the reductionist style, and pretty much most of our knowledge is reductionist knowledge. Nonetheless, I'm going to try to give you a holistic view of the immune system. So what do we know about the immune system? Well, things inside the body of an organism which tries to protect. Protect against what? Protect against things which might cause harm to our body. And things which might cause harm to our body, even though sometimes they might come from inside, in the majority of cases, they come from outside. So today we know that mostly they are microbial organisms. So in order to start this holistic view of immune system, if I succeed in doing that, I'm going to start with this. So from very, very old times, people knew that we have barriers at the surface of our body which protect us. So that was very obvious from ancient times. How did they knew that? Well, they had this observation that when somebody's skin is injured, especially in wars, bad things happen to that region. So it gets red and it gets sort of painful, and then white stuff that was named pus, P-U-S, appearing there, and then even the entire tissue might be lost. So they knew that there has to be an intact physical barrier at the surface of the body, and that barrier was a skin. So there is a skin, and we know that, well, later from histology, it's composed of epithelial cells, and it's not just a physical barrier, it produces a stuff. And that stuff, like sweat, also plays a protective role. Later, they came to understand that it's not only the surface of the body, it's also inside the body, the part of the body that we ingest food. That part, which is the gastrointestinal tract, has the physical barrier. So epithelial cells, which produce saliva, acid in the stomach, biles and enzymes, and even the surface of the lungs, where we inhale air, and of course a lot of stuff that might be present in the air, including microbes, that has a physical barrier, and the surface of it has particular characteristics that protect us. So people knew from ancient times that we have to have this sort of physical chemical barriers that protect us. But that was not the end of the story. What if the physical chemical barrier is breached? What if something gets through? What's the story afterwards? Well, observations, as is the case for natural sciences, gave people the understanding that we have at least two more layers of defense. One of these layers of defense is a general layer of defense. It does not act specifically for specific entities. It's there kind of like the physical chemical barrier. But another level of defense is a level of defense which acts specific to the invading entity. How did they acquire this general conceptual scheme or conceptual idea? Well, I'm going to show you by showing you the picture and telling you a brief story about two scientists. This one was a Russian scientist named Mechnikov. He was living at the end of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, and he had a very interesting observation. Mechnikov was a zoologist. So he was interested in studying animals. Zoologist, zoologist. So one of the things that was interested to study was to study animals that were small enough so that he can put them under the microscope. And what kind of things you can put under the microscope? Well, one of the major books in the history of biology is a book named Micrographia. And Micrographia was a book that was published by Micrographia. Was a book that was published by a scientist named Robert Hooke, who was contemporary with Isaac Newton. And he started using microscope, a very, very early microscope in 16th century, yes, to study living entities. So he started, putting different things like ants and lice and fleas and flies under the microscope, looking at the cells. By the way, the name cell is the name that was coined by or used by Robert Hooke the first time that he was looking at a cork, basically, and different things. But in order to look at these things, you have to kill them. So you cannot put an ant that is moving under a microscope or a fly that is flying under a microscope. So that's not doable. So what Mechnikov was interested in doing was to look at things under the microscope when they are alive. And that's not an easy thing to do because if it's alive, it starts moving around. So what he did was to use starfish. You know, starfish? Starfish. So the starfish is a marine animal. The starfish larva. Starfish larva. So this is an animal which reproduces through, I don't know, the zygote becomes a larvae. And the larvae is completely transparent. It's completely transparent. It's very tiny, but it's completely transparent and it doesn't move much. So this was a model organism that Mechnikov used to study life under the microscope. So he was putting the starfish larvae under the microscope and visualizing it, different parts and different movements inside. And one day he came to the idea that, well, what happens if I inject this larvae with some foreign bodies? So he took a needle and put that needle inside some sort of pigments, some sort of, I don't know, in the beginning, I think he started with some red pigments, and pierce the body of the larvae with that needle with the pigments. See what happens, looking under the microscope, the live animal. So what he saw was very interesting. He noticed that when you inject the larvae with some pigments, there are cells, things like cells, that start to move from other regions of the larvae and they go towards that region of the pigments and they circumscribe that pigmented region and eat it away. Or he didn't know about eating, he saw that they're removing it away. So that was an interesting observation. Then he started injecting the larvae with different things. So he started with some charcoal, and then some other pigments that he had, and some. I think he put some microbes inside too because they could culture microbes. And every time that he was doing it, whether it was a red pigment or charcoal or a microbe, he saw the same behavior, a similar behavior. There were cells they were cells that he later named phagocytes. The name phagocyte and phagocytosis comes from Mechnikov. They were sort of encircling this region with the pigments or microbes or charcoal or whatever he was putting his needle in, and they were eating it away or removing it away. And he had the feeling that maybe they are eating it away. So how else can a cell remove something? So he named it phagocytes. And he published this stuff, and his results were replicated by other people. And they came to the understanding that there is a mechanism, and the larvae, by the way, the larvae survived afterwards. So there is a mechanism of eating away foreign bodies, which does not differentiate between a red pigment or a blue pigment or a microbe or charcoal. They behave all the same every time. So there should be, if this is the case for this small animal, there might be similar entities inside our bodies that are able to eat away things which are injurious, things which are bad, things which are noxious. And they don't differentiate between them. They eat away whatever you put them. So they are acting sort of in a general way. They don't act in a specific way. Almost 100 years before Mechnikov, there was another scientist, this time a British scientist. So Mechnikov was a zoologist, but this guy, whose name was Edward Jenner, he was a physician. So he was interested in disease. And one of the major problems in the time that Jenner lived, a disease which belonged to the family of the chicken pox, but was worse than chicken pox. So you see chicken pox today, but fortunately you don't see smallpox these days. So one of the major infectious diseases, today we know that it's infectious, but at that time they didn't know that. One of the major infectious diseases that has inflicted human societies for millennia is a smallpox. So smallpox is caused by, today we know that by a virus, pox virus, which belongs to the same family of viruses as the chickenpox. But chickenpox is not that bad. So chickenpox If you get it, it's okay. Nobody dies. Well, almost nobody dies from chickenpox. And chickenpox, it appears with the discolorations. They are named macules and papules and blisters, tiny ones at the surface of the skin. I got chickenpox when I was a child because at that time, varicella vaccination was not being done. Today, they do it in Iran, and I'm sure they do it in other countries in Middle East. So chickenpox is not that bad, but the smallpox is very bad. And by the way, I usually ask the students why it has been called smallpox. Why is it small? So do we have a greater pox? So I let you guys research that. So one of the problems at the time of gender was a smallpox, and it was, smallpox causes this big blisters. And by the way, this is the picture of one of the latest natural cases of smallpox, 1974, 1973, 1973. It's, you can find it on WHO website, and it's from a Bangladeshi girl who had the disease and survived afterwards. So if a person gets smallpox, he or she either dies or survives with a lot of scars, with a lot of scars. And it was common when I was very young to see people with smallpox scars. Not very common, not don't see them everywhere, but there are people who had them. And one of the problems that we had, basically, I did my degree in Mashhad, so we had basically. Mashhad is located on northeastern Iran. So we had smallpox people who had eye damage, because these blisters can happen inside the eye too, and we are seeing most of the cases in ophthalmology ward. So, well, not like that, but tiny blisters on the conjunctiva, and they were coming to do ophthalmology work. So if somebody survives smallpox, there will be a lot of scars. There will be a lot of scars, and those scars are going to remain for the rest of the life. And at the time, well, not like this, usually at the face, like this at the face. So this is the scar that remains after vaccination, but usually at the face. So what Edward Jenner saw was something very, very interesting. So he noticed that in his society at the time, late 18th century, pretty much everybody or people from every sort of stratum of the society had this scars,
except upon
except one particular group of people.
Gal Galphons.
You're close. So who were that particular group of people? They were milkmaids, girls that were milking cows. So what you expect, okay, well, who should be sort of immune, or who should be protected against this? Very rich people? No, rich people were contracting the smallpox like others. Should it be teachers, physicians themselves, people who had a very good education? No, all of them could contract smallpox. You could see the scars on their face. But a particular group of people, milkmaids, they usually had very nice, scarless, soft, smooth skin. And this was a very interesting observation. This tells us about the difference between scientists and non-scientists. Like if we see something like this in our society, a particular group of people, for instance, who don't get HIV, particular group of people who don't get cancer, for instance. We say that, well, yeah, it's for genetic reasons or whatever, and we pass by. But Edward Jenner did not pass by. So he investigated the reason why these people didn't have this problem. So he called some of them and examined their skin. And he noticed something very interesting. They didn't have any blisters or scars at their surface, at the skin, but they had tiny blisters on their fingers most of the time, or scars from blisters on their fingers. And that was very interesting. How come they get it? Well, it's obvious. What is the place that the finger of a milkmaid touches that other people's fingers don't touch? Well, it's the breast, it's the udder of the cow. So he examined cows, and he noticed that a lot of cows at the time had tiny blisters on their udders, on their breasts, in the milking region. Well, cows have a disease named cowpox. Cowpox. And that disease is not deadly for cows as opposed to smallpox for humans. And he noticed that these girls, because of their exposure to cowpox, develop a very mild version of the human disease, or a disease which looks like human disease. And that protects them. That was the hypothesis. So this is very important. So you will have a class named research methodology later. And one of the things that we have to talk about is the meaning of hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? So the Arabic word for hypothesis, exactly. So we use the same word in Farsi too. So hypothesis is a proposed explanation for a phenomenon. What is the phenomenon? Milkmaids don't get the disease. What is your proposed explanation? Because of the touching of the udder of the cause, they develop some disease that protects them. That is the hypothesis. Is this something that I can report? No. I have to do investigations. That is where the research starts. So he did an experiment, which is an interesting experiment. He took the little fluid from the basically blisters of the cause and injected a boy with that. And he noticed that that boy and other people with the same process, that underwent the same process, are protected against smallpox. So how he did that, I'll tell you later in the class if we come to that. Some people say that what Edward Jenner was unethical. Research ethics. One of the things that you have to follow in your research is that it has to be ethical. You cannot expose people to disease. And some people condemn Edward Jenner of exposing people to smallpox, but that was not what happened. I will tell you later if we have time what happened. So one of the other things that Edward Jenner saw was that these milkmaids, they were only protected against smallpox. They were not protected against diphtheria. They were not protected against cholera, which was another infectious disease. They were not protected against other types of infections like pharyngitis. They were not protected against tetanus. So only for this very specific thing. Other things, they could catch it, they could contract it like other people. So it gave him the idea, and later other people, that there is a level of defense which acts specifically. One layer of defense, which later people came to recognize the cells that were responsible for them, was general, following Mechnikov. These are mostly phagocytes, or phagocyte-like cells. But then we had a specific level of defense, the one that Edward Jenner noticed perhaps for the first time, and other people noticed that there are other examples that acts specifically. And they gave them names. So they studied these two sorts of immune defense later. One of them, as I mentioned, was not acting specifically. And the other property that it lacked, it was memory. It did not keep a memory of the encounters. So if I'm a phagocyte and I see a bacterium like an E. coli for the first time and I phagocyte it, if you give me the same bacterium 2 weeks after this, it's as if I'm seeing it for the first time. I do exactly the same thing. If I see 2 months after this, it's exactly the same. I do not keep a memory of my previous encounters. It's not a specific, and it doesn't have memory, but it's always there. It's always ready to act. It doesn't need time to prepare. The other level of defense that people noticed, it was acting specifically, like what Edward Jenner found, but it was also keeping a memory of the encounters. It was specific and it had memory. They later came to recognize that these are caused by lymphocytes, like B lymphocytes, which produce antibodies. And if it sees a pathogen for the first time, it produces antibodies. If it sees the same pathogen 2 months or 6 months or 2 years later, it produces antibodies faster and better and nicer. So it keeps a memory of the previous encounters. But it takes time to prepare. If you inject the larvae with something external, the phagocytes will move on immediately. But if you inject the body of a person with something to produce antibodies, it takes days or even weeks for that antibody to be produced at sufficient levels. So it doesn't take time. This one takes time. It doesn't act specifically. It doesn't keep a memory. This one does. So they gave them names: innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Innate is always there, it's ready to act. Adaptive, it has to adapt. It takes time. And it became physical chemical barriers, innate and adaptive. However, we human beings like dichotomies. What is a dichotomy? What is a dichotomy? A dichotomy is something that is divided to two possibilities, not three or four or five. Dichotomy, it's either this one or that one, like left and right, up, down, 1, 0, plus, minus. Our world and our language is full of dichotomies. So they made this a dichotomy. How they did that? Well, they said physical chemical barriers have all the properties of the innate immune system. What are the properties of the innate immune system? It's always there, it doesn't act specifically, and it doesn't have memory. So that is the case for physical chemical barriers. If it's my skin, it's always there. It doesn't need time to protect me. It doesn't act specifically. Whatever pathogen that it's surface, the skin and the sweat, or maybe the acid in my stomach, or the surfactant at the surface of lung epithelium tries to protect. It doesn't act specifically. And it doesn't keep a memory. If I have a bacterium today, it will act as if it has seen it for the first time. So innate immune system has two parts: physical chemical barriers as well as phagocytes. And they came up with this. This is a model of the immune system. We will use it very often in this course and subsequent courses. Immune system has two arms: innate part and adaptive part. The innate part is composed of physical chemical barriers and cells. What kind of cells? Granulocytes, monocytes, things which are usually perform phagocytosis, as well as the adaptive immune system. Adaptive immune system has two subparts. One part is present in body fluids. Later, they recognized that it's caused by B cells, but in the beginning, they didn't know that. Humor means fluid, so they called it humoral immunity. Different from that was another part of the adaptive immune system. They called it cellular immunity. Cellular immunity. Later, they came to recognize that T cells are responsible for that. And this is a very bad name. Cellular immunity. The first time that I saw it, it was very confusing. Why? Why this specific type of adaptive immunity is named cellular? Aren't these cells? Aren't these cells? Aren't the epithelial cells that cover our body cells? So you see cells everywhere. Why this one has been named cellular immunity? Any ideas?
Yeah, because it's because almost phagocytosis, but on a specific level.
They do not perform phagocytosis, actually.
I mean, some of them release toxins, for example, to kill. But on
Cells. So they could have made it.
It's a cell to cell.
Well, it's cell to cell level, not necessarily. If you mean cell-cell contact, no, a lot of T cells don't perform contacts with their targets. Cellular. I could have called this one cellular. This B cells. I could have called granulocytes performing phagocytosis cellular. Why this one? Well, like many other names, it's because of any ideas?
T cells is response.
T cell responsible what? T cells are responsible for responding to antigens. So are B cells.
Because of the way they found out about T cells.
They do what?
Way they found out about T cells.
They had no idea about lymphocytes at the time. Lymphocytes were recognized decades later after this humoral and cellular nomenclature was added. So it has a historical reason. It has a historical reason. So one of the main things in immunology is how you can transfer immunity from an individual to other one. Transferring immunity. How you can transfer immunity, say between a human being and another human being, or between a human being and between a mouse, between an animal and human being. How you can transfer immunity? That's a very crucial question. So why is it important? Because sometimes I'm not immune to something. I get a disease. So you have two possibilities. Either activate my own immune system, like what happens in vaccination. It's called active immunotherapy.
Or I import.
Or you can import it. Like it's like a country. So either you make your own weapons or you import them from another country. These are two possibilities. If I want to protect myself, either I make my own gun, or if I can't make my own gun, or if it takes too long, sometimes the enemy has attacked, you don't have time to make your own weapons. You have to get it from somebody. So how you can transfer immunity between two animals? How you can transfer immunity between two animals? And in the case of humans, how you can transfer immunity from an immune person, like this is a mouse, for example, okay, to a non-immune person.
Either by serum or by cells.
Exactly. So they noticed that there are two types of immunity. One of those immunities, it was sufficient to transfer body fluids from the immune entity to the non-immune entity, to the non-immune person. They called it humoral immunity. But there was another type of immunity that you had to transfer cells. What kind of cells? Blood cells. Blood cells. Because that's the one that is more easily transferred, okay? So you cannot transfer other types of cells. So you had to get the leukocytes. By blood cell here, we mean not red blood cells. Well, red blood cells are transferred in transfusion, but not those cells, leukocytes. You had to transfer leukocytes if you want to transfer immunity. They named it cellular immunity. Later, they recognized that, okay, we have many, many different types of cells, and the cells that are responsible in here are a subgroup of lymphocytes named T lymphocytes, but that came later. So they named it cellular immunity. They named it cellular immunity. Okay, but the name stuck afterwards. So it has a historical reason behind it. All right. So they came up with this model of the immune system. So are you tired? You want to take a break, or shall I continue for another half an hour? Okay, so let me just well, it's kind of necessary for you to for us to be in the same page. That's the English expression, to be in the same page, because like to make sure that you have the same sort of conceptual understanding of the immune system that we do, or the textbook does. So that we can continue more easily afterwards. So they came with this model of the immune system, and this model has two dichotomies. One is here, innate versus adaptive, and then again in here, barriers versus cells, B cells versus T cells, two dichotomies. All right. So here comes another very important concept that I want to tell you about. It's extremely important, although usually people don't talk about it in immunology classes, but I find it very important. And it's the concept of scientific model. This is very important to know. Most people either don't care about it or, well, whatever. So in science, we have something called scientific model. What is a scientific model? So a scientific model is where scientists represent something in the real world in a way that makes it easier to understand. Something in the real world in a way that makes it easier to understand. What we can see from Wikipedia is an activity that produces models representing empirical objects. What is a model then? A model is an informative representation of an object, person, or system. So I sort of simplify it in this way. A model, this is very important. A model, and here we mean scientific model, not fashion models or something. So a scientific model is, and I expect you guys to remember this for the rest of your career. Scientific model, a simplified representation of, instead of object, person, things like that, I say this. A simplified representation of what?
The concept.
Of reality. A simplified, three words. putting the propositions aside. A simplified representation of reality. What is reality? Whatever is out there. Why do we need a simplified representation? For different reasons. First, for educational purposes. Second, for analytical purposes. We need to understand it. That is called a scientific model. We have three groups of scientific models: physical models, conceptual models, and the letter M in here is not working. Mathematical mathematical models.
It's never 100% correct, either one.
Absolutely. That is what is inherent in the meaning of model. What are physical models? Things like this. You make something physically. You can hold it, you can touch it. It's called a physical model. Like this physical model of the heart. So you go to anatomy class, you learn about ventricles and atria and veins and whatever the like the structure that is present in the heart. Then later you go and take this model from the library and open it and look at it. It's called a physical model. It's a physical model. Why are physical models used? What is the reason for using them? Mostly for educational purposes. Visualizing, exactly. But you can visualize by drawing a picture too. But you can use this for better visualization. So I have a model on the right side. What is this one a model for? This one.
Solar system.
It's a model of the solar system. And in contrast to this one, which is static, doesn't move, this one moves. So you can turn on the light in here, which is basically representing sun, and then you have different planets. This is Earth and Jupiter and Saturn and the rest of them, and they start moving around. So this is an example of a physical model. The second group of models are called conceptual models. In conceptual models, you do not make something physically. You usually draw it on a piece of paper in order to make things understandable. Like these conceptual models for the atom. In the beginning, people believed that atoms are like billiard balls that contact each other and bang into each other and move away and towards each other. Then they later understood that there are positive charges and negative charges. So Thomson came up with the plum pudding model. So it's a model with different raisins inside, which had negative charges in a context of positive charges. Then Rutherford said that no, the positive charges are located at the center and the rest of things are moving around it. Then Bohr came and said that, well, they cannot be everywhere they want. They have to be in like a solar system and specific orbits. And today we have the quantum mechanical model. These are conceptual models. And these models have been refuted. Sometimes might use this one still in physics classes, but the quantum mechanical model is the best model. Or the conceptual model that we use in biology, like cells are either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. We have animal cells, plant cells, they have nuclei and ribosomes and stuff like that. But the most advanced level of models are mathematical models, because these models cannot be used for predictions. You can predict some stuff with them, but they're not easy to be used for predictions. You can use them for analysis, this one for education, this one for analysis. But the one that gives us real power are mathematical models. Basically, all of physics, everything that you learn about in physics is a mathematical model, like F equals ma, or the gravitation. So we also use mathematical models in biology. All these things that you hear about chat GPT and artificial intelligence and artificial neural networks are based on simple mathematical models of a neuron. So this is a neuron, but this neuron is not going to be good for computer scientists. So they need to make it mathematical. So they say that, okay, we have inputs denoted by x0, x1, 2, 3. These inputs have different weights when they want to enter the cell, and then you have a cell that multiplies these numbers with these weights and integrates them, and it gives an output function. It's a mathematical model. So what kind of model is this? Take a piece of paper and pens and write down. Do you have a piece of paper? So come to this class always with a piece of paper and pen, because sometimes you need to write. So could you borrow a piece of paper and pen from one of your classmates? I need you to write two things in here. Well, what is a scientific model? Write it down. Write it down. I want you to take the pen in your hand touch the paper, write it down. That is one way to memorize things that we don't use very often these days because of the computers and laptops and keyboards and stuff like that. What is a model? Write it down. 3 words. What are 3 types of models? And what kind of model this is? All right. Give me. Oh, okay. So you wrote it in your book. Okay. See it? Can I see it? Now, can I see it? What is a model? Okay, where did you write it? What is a model? No, don't write my questions. Write the answer to the questions. Don't write what is a model. Write what is the answer to the question. What is a model? Well, if you want to write down the question, it's okay, but write the answer. What is a model? So I know Mr. Rezai, Mr. Haidar, Miss Alcora, Miss Sabine, Miss Rava, and Miss Sam. Okay, Miss Sam. Okay, write the answer. What is a model? Come on. I just told you. No, not this one. What is the meaning of scientific model? 3 words.
So what's model?
The third question is what kind of model this was?
Times.
The types and what kind of model is this one? What is a scientific model? Can I see? Okay. A simplified representation of reality. Write it down. You have to memorize it. A simplified representation of reality. Write it down in here. You don't have pen? Okay, so come to this class with pens all the time. A simplified, write it down. A simplified, I want you to write it down. I might ask you in the exam as well. The simplified representation of reality. Sorry. What are the 3 types of models?
Physical.
Biological models. I didn't talk about biological models. I didn't talk about physical. What are the 3 types of models? Mr. right? Okay. Physical models, conceptual models, mathematical models. Physical models, conceptual models, mathematical models. All right? What kind of model is this? It's not a mathematical model. It's a conceptual model. It's a conceptual model. It doesn't have any mathematics in it. All right? So mathematics is when you have formulas. When you have formulas, when you have equations. Huh? It's conceptual. Even if there is or, which I don't have in here, that would be logical operators. It's not mathematical. All right? Okay. So why did I show you all this? Because I wanted to show you this sentence. This is very important. Write this down. Write what down? Don't look at me. Look at you. This is a very important. Write it down. Write it down. Okay? Write it down. What is the famous quote about scientific models? What is the famous quote? What is it? Miss Sabrine, what is it? Read it from here. All models, read it, please read it loud. Read it from here. No. Exactly. All models are wrong. It means that the model is different from reality. Model is not the same as reality. A model is a simplified representation of reality. It's one way of looking at something. When you say simplified representation, it means that it's an approximation. Approximation. What is an approximation? Something which looks like something else, but it's not the same as that. All models are wrong. So when he says models are wrong, so we've had models in the history of science, like this one, like the geocentric one. What is a geocentric model? Geocentric model of the solar system. What is geocentric model? That Earth is located at the center of the solar. So this model has been factually wrong. But when he says models are wrong, he means our current scientific models, the good ones, including the quantum model, including this model, including this model.
Mathematical models are mostly right.
No, even mathematical models are approximations. Anything that is a model, including mathematical models, including these are approximations. Sometimes, especially in physics, we believe that things like second law of Newton or law of gravitation, these are exactly the same as reality. They are not. They're just approximations of reality. And we don't have time to get into that. Otherwise, I would have explained how could it be? Let's check here. How could it be that things like laws of gravitation are not quite right either? All right. So, but our class is immunology, so I'm going to focus on this. So, what is wrong with this model? Any ideas?
What is wrong with the model?
What is wrong with this model? So, let me ask our friends who are kind of more quiet. So, we have Miss Sabrine and Miss Zahra. Miss Sabrine and Miss Zahra. Any ideas? What could be wrong with this model? To me, it seems like a very good one. To me, it seems like a very good model. It's either innate response or adaptive response, and then we have barriers and cells, B cells, and T cells. What's wrong with it? This one doesn't have memory and specificity this one has. Let's just hold on. I will ask you later. What could it be wrong? Any ideas? Hmm? What's wrong with the adaptive immune system? More specific. Okay, any idea? What's that? Uh huh. Can you repeat it? This guy, this guy in here says all models are wrong. What is wrong with my model? This is a representation of the immune, huh? What's wrong with the innate immune system? What is wrong? So do you understand that? Okay, is there a language problem in here? Do you understand my question or not? So my question is, I made a model of the immune system. What is a model? A simplified representation. I'm saying that this is the immune system, or actually I can say the structure of the immune system. Okay, this is the structure of the immune system. Then I said that this is a model. What kind of model? It's a conceptual model. It's not a physical model. I haven't made something. It's not a mathematical model either because I don't have any mathematical equations in here. I simply say that the immune system is either innate or adaptive. The innate part is either barriers or cells. The adaptive is either transferred through body fluids or cells. This is called a simplified representation. Do you understand the meaning of simplified representation? Okay, a simplified representation. So, what is wrong with my representation by looking at this? And then, of course, I assigned attributes to it. I said that this one is always there, it doesn't have specificity and memory. This one takes time to prepare and it acts specifically and it keeps a memory. So, what is wrong with it? Miss Rabo, can you help me? What's wrong with the adaptive immune system? It's not about innate or adaptive immune system. It's about the entire thing. Mr. Rezai, any idea? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? It's not detailed much. Okay, good.
It's too general.
How can I make it more specific?
A lot of things that must be mentioned. It is not this simple only, even if it's a simplified model.
Okay.
We have to mention more details, or at least not.
Like what?
Like, for example, there are different types of T cells.
The problem with this model is not that it lacks details. You can add details to it without changing the model.
It's dichotomy. It's not all. Immune system is not only dichotomy.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Like as humans, we like to just separate things into two.
Good. Okay.
Two models.
Okay.
Things.
Okay. What's wrong with that?
It's wrong because we cannot.
What is wrong with me saying that things are either right or left? What's wrong with that?
Because there's middle.
Because there are many other things which are neither right or left. Exactly. So the problem is with the dichotomy. You cannot separate innate immune system from adaptive immune system. That is the first thing. They work together all the time, like two hands. Okay, so you cannot separate, okay, things which I do with my right hand and things which I do with my left hand. There might be things like that, but for the majority of things, I use them together. So exactly, you cannot separate them. The second thing, these attributes that I mentioned, that this one has memory, this one lacks memory and a specificity, and this one has memory and a specificity. Sometimes we have things in here which show these attributes. Like now we have a group of cells named the natural killer cells that show memory, even though we consider them as parts of the innate immune system. And we have lymphocytes which lack memory, or they have a very weak type of memory.
CD8 type?
No. CD8 has very good memory. So a particular group of cells.
CD4
No, CD8s also have memory. So, and we have lymphocytes. We have lymphocytes which do not act specifically. We have lymphocytes which do not act specifically. So, two problems. Yes, go ahead if you have a question. So, two problems. You cannot separate them, and I have separated them. Why did I do that? For learning purposes. It's easier to understand. That's one reason that we do model. That's one reason we do model. The second thing, there are a lot of things on the right side that have the attributes of the things on the left side and the other one. So sometimes people say they are located in the gray region. In the gray region, either spelling that we use. So it's not black and white. Okay, it's not black and white. They are located in the gray region. That is wrong with this model. And it's actually wrong the same for a lot of different things. So we do a lot of modeling in our everyday life. Good and bad. Right and wrong. Haq, batil. Khair, shar. It's easier for me. Okay, I'm the good one. The other ones that oppose me are the bad ones. I'm haq. The other ones that oppose me are batil. I'm the khair, and usually the good one belongs to me. I never said I'm the bad one, the other one is the good one. Okay, usually that doesn't happen. So we separate things, but in the majority of cases, it's not like that. I'm not purely good, and people who oppose me are purely bad. That's the dichotomy. And this dichotomizing things have led to a lot of problems in this world. Saying that all of the good things are with me. Self-righteousness. I'm the right one. If somebody agrees with me, he's okay. If somebody disagrees with me, they are the bad guys. They are so it's this dichotomizing is the root cause of a lot of problems. So the question to ask is that can I make a better model of the immune system? Instead of this, I could have made a better model of the immune system. I could have made a better approximation of the immune system. And that approximation would be something like this. We have invading pathogens up here, and then we have cells starting to generate a network of interacting entities. This is a better model of the immune system. It's called a network. model of the immune system. It doesn't separate cells into innate and adaptive and B cells and T cells. The entire thing is one whole interacting entity. How do they interact? The cells talk to each other, either by secreting something, which is named cytokine, or by attaching each other. And they make a network like this. Like, this is a better model. It's called a network model, but we don't use network models in these classes. Why? Because network models. Okay, so again, the question, is this equivalent to reality? No. This is just an approximation of reality. So this word is very important. I just want to make sure that you understand what is the meaning of approximation. So let me just write it down in here. English to Arabic. Actually, I'm curious to know what is the approximation in Arabic.
تقدير.
It's a تقريب, okay? Approximation of reality. Huh?
تقدير أو تقريب.
تقدير is different.
تقدير.
تقريب is here. تقدير is completely different. So a model is a simplified representation of reality. Okay, a model. By model, نموذج here means scientific model. Let me say. A scientific model, okay, is a simplified representation of reality. It's different from reality. Okay, let me write. All models are wrong, but some of them are useful. All right? Clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Is it clear? Crystal clear, okay? So there are things which is called crystal clear. Okay, is it crystal clear in the mind what I'm meaning here? This is important, okay? A simplified representation of reality. All models are wrong, but some of them are useful. So the one that I'm showing you in here, it's a better model of the immune system, but we don't use it because it's a bit complicated. And actually, it would be even nicer if I could make it a mathematical model, because these arrows that I'm showing in here, you don't know what does it mean. It only means that they're sort of interacting. What kind of interaction? Is this cell activating this cell? Is this cell inhibiting this cell? Is it sending a positive signal or negative signal? What kind of signal? How much of that signal? What is the effect of that signal? So this is very obscure. What is, you know the meaning of obscure? Will be obscure. It's very unclear, okay? So this model is very simplified, but it's better than my previous model, all right? But we're not going to use it in this class. These kind of models, especially if you add mathematical equations to them, are used in a field of study called computational immunology, which is a very interesting field of study, computational immunology. All right. So if you start doing a PhD in here or somewhere else, maybe you decide to work on computational immunology or mathematical immunology. So you use specific models, usually network models, to describe immune system. All right. So I don't have a lot of time. So what I'm going to do in this class and the rest of the course is to stick to this model. Use this one. Simplified version. Sticking to something, holding something. I'm not letting you go. Okay, I'm sticking to you. Okay, I'm sticking to this model. I'm holding on to it, even though I know this is not complete. I know this has a lot of shortcomings. What's the shortcoming? It has a lot of limitations. All right, but for educational purposes, I'm going to stick to this. So when you move on, you might use more complicated models. This is a model of the structure of the immune system. I was trying to give you a holistic view. This is a holistic view, kind of the structure. Do we have a view or a model of the function of the immune system? Can I model the function of the immune system?
You can try.
Can I try to make a simplified representation of the function of the immune system? Yes, I can, using this. This is our model of the function of the immune system. What is the model of the function of immune system? Immune system is a set of things which has to answer two questions. Are you self or non-self? Yes. And this was actually the original model of the immune system was this one dimensional, one question. But later people came to recognize that this is not good at all. Why?
There are non-self that are tolerable.
Because not all self entities are good, and not all foreign entities are bad. We have things which are non-self, but they're quite good. Or at least they are harmless. They are harmless. And we have self entities that are very dangerous. So you have to add this one. You have to add a second dimension, like the XY dimension in Cartesian geometry, like in algebra. And so we had the X and we had the Y, we had the horizontal axis, the vertical axis. So you have to differentiate between self and non-self, safe and non-safe. And then you have four regions in here. Infectious agents would be here. They are foreign bodies, and they are dangerous. All right? A lot of molecules up there are self, belong to me, and they're good. Like hemoglobin in the red cells, myoglobin in my muscles, neurotransmitters in my brain. But then you end up with this and that. Take up your pens. Give me 3 examples from there and 3 examples in here. 1 minute. Is the question clear? Is the question clear?
Yes.
So give me 3 examples of self entities which are not safe, which are harmful, which are dangerous. And then give me 3 non-self entities which are, well, at least they're harmless. They're harmless. Any ideas? Or to quiet friends in here?
Self-immune system.
Self, they belong to my own body, but they can be dangerous. Or they belong somewhere else. They're foreign to my body, but they're harmless. They're good.
The foreign and non-safe.
Write it down.
Okay.
You don't have pen? Could you borrow? Okay, so don't come to this class without, at least my classes and the rest of the class, without paper and pen. Okay, I'm very traditional. So you have to be able to write down. Okay, so what about up there, Mr. Rezai? In here. Can you give me an example of things in here? Self which is dangerous. Self which is dangerous. Waste? What kind of waste? Like urine and feces and stuff like that?
No, but that's non-self.
No, non-self is here. So here it's self. It belongs to the body of the organism, but it's dangerous. Cancer cells. Very good. Flora is here. Flora is here. Okay, good. Neoplastic cells or cancer cells. They are self, but they're and injured cells. If a cell gets injured, it's still self, but you have to take care of it. You have to do something. You have to remove it. Otherwise, it will cause problems. All right. How about this one, Miss Sabrine, Miss Sahra? This one. They are foreign. You know, foreigners. Foreign bodies. Say it again. Bacteria. What kind of bacteria? Normal flora. The bacteria that I have in my gut. They are non-self, but they are safe. At least as long as they stay where they belong. What else? What else?
There was an organ.
What else? What else? I go outside and it's a spring and a lot of pollens are released. Pollens, you know what pollen is?
Yeah.
Pollens, things that
It causes
plants generate. Pollens. They're non-self, but they're harmless. Unless your immune system makes a mistake. And here we're not talking about mistakes yet, okay? Antigens are things which enter to our body through food. So later you will hear a lot in this course about antigens. You have heard about them before. So antigens, okay? But for now, let's stick to foreign bodies. There are a lot of things in food which enter our body. They are non-self, but they're safe. Pollens. What else? If I have a kidney problem and I receive a transplant, the graft, it's non-self, but it's safe. All right? So, antibodies which I produce myself are self. They're good. But if I receive antibodies from somebody else, vaccines, exactly, vaccines. Vaccines are non-self but safe. But sometimes you receive antibodies from somebody else. Antibodies which has been made in the body of a horse. Okay? For some reasons. Like if I get bitten by a snake snake bite, I have to receive horse serum to protect my body. That's one of the examples of transferring immunity. So that antibody is horse antibody. So it's non-self, but it's protecting me. It's protecting
Can
me.
we say blood?
Blood transfusion, sure. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. Blood transfusion. Huh? Vaccines, yes. Fetus for the mother. Fetus. At least half of the molecules in the fetus are coming from father. So to the mother, it's foreign. At least half of it is foreign. All right? So, okay. So how about the function of the immune system? This is the function. If you are here, if you are dangerous, you have to have immune response. If you are safe, you don't have to have immune response. It's called tolerance, lack of immune response. But the tolerance, what is the Arabic word for tolerance? Come on, you're an Arabic speaking person. Tahammul. All right. So the tolerance in here is, again, it's not a very good name. Why? Because when you say tolerance in English or tahammul in Arabic, like I'm tolerating you, it means that I don't like you, but I have no choice. Well, not necessarily suspicious. I don't like you. Like in the dormitory, I don't know if you guys live in dormitories in the past. So sometimes you have roommates that you don't like, but you have to put up with them. You have to tolerate them. All right? This tolerance is not like that. This tolerance means I like you and I support you. Tahammul, this meaning, a positive meaning of the word. Immune system tolerating these things is that, okay, yeah, I don't like you, but I have no choice. No, I like you and I support your presence. That is the meaning of immune tolerance, immune or immunological tolerance. So this one, you're bad, I'm going to get rid of you. This one, I like you and I support you. All right? So this is a holistic version of the immune system function. Okay, it's a model. Write it down again. What is the meaning of a model? Write it down, write it down, write it down, write it down. 3 words, write it down. And then the famous sentence. Okay, I'm going to come to you guys. What is the meaning of scientific model? By the way, cell phones are not allowed in the class unless you want to share something. Okay, what is a scientific model? I wrote it there, translated it to Arabic so that I can make sure that you knew it. What is a scientific model? You can write it in Arabic too. Okay. Write it down. A simplified, write it down. You don't write it. A simplified, write it down, write it down. A simplified, write it down. A simplified representation of reality. Okay? Write it down. What is a scientific model? A simplified representation of reality. What was the famous quote about models? Write it down. Write it down. Write it down. Write it down. Take up the pen. The famous quote, the famous sentence, quote me sentence. What is a sentence about reality, about models?
All models are.
All write it down, write it down. Then tell me what kind of model is this? Is it a physical model?
No.
Is it a mathematical model? It's a conceptual model. What's wrong with this model? That's my next question. Write it down. All models are wrong. Wrong. W-R-O-N-G. Okay? But good. Write it down. All models are, write it down. All models, M-O-D-E-L, are wrong. Wrong, it means they're approximation. Come on. All models are wrong. What is no? But some of them are useful. But some of them are useful. So why do we use them if they are wrong? Because they are useful. They can't help us. All right. So what's wrong with this model? There is no gray area. Again, it's a dichotomy. You're either safe or not safe. Well, a lot of times it depends on the situation. Sometimes something might be safe or non-safe. There should be a gray region in here. Self or non-self? Well, I can say, okay, anything inside my body is self, anything outside, is that correct? No, bacteria are inside my body, but I consider them non-self. So that is something that we need to, so I kind of try to include that by making a color spectrum. You see, this is very blue, this is very red, but something in between. This is very green, this is kind of pink, something in between. So that's one thing.
So what do you think? Circle model, and then there's intersection between two circles, that's the gray area.
Sure, yeah, you can come up with that. So I'll give you the task of making that model for immune system next time. All right, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. The other issue is I have said either immune response or tolerance, as if the immune system is like a lamp. You can either turn it on or off. Is immune system like that? It's not like that. It's not like that. Immune system has many components, like this one that I showed you in here. Does this one looks like something that you can either turn it on or off? No. It has many components. Which part of it is on? Which part of it is off? And even it's not on or off. Can I say that this cell is on or off? No, it has different levels of activity. So by putting it this way, I'm oversimplifying it. Could I have made a better model? Yes. If I had added another dimension in here, and even another dimension, and then another dimension, a dimension for neutrophils, a dimension for monocytes, a dimension for B cells, a dimension for T cells, all these sorts of things, it would be an n-dimensional model, not a two-dimensional model. All right? So an n-dimensional model would be much better. But our brains cannot understand anything more than 3 dimensions. So for now, I'm going to stick to this model. Okay? Sticking to something. What is it? Sticking. I'm not letting this go. Even though I know that this is not the best drink. You could have brought me something else. But in the absence of other drinks, this cup of tea is all what I have. Okay? Can you have anything better than that? يسقون من رحيق مختوم. But I don't have access to Rahiq al-Makhtum for now. And I don't know in the other world I will have access to that. Maybe I have access to something extremely hot, which cannot be. Maybe I have access to something that God gives bad people. So for now, I'm going to stick to this, even though I know this is not the best drink I can have. For now, I'm going to stick to this as the function of the immune system. And by the way, I'm talking about immune system in healthy conditions, in good conditions. Can I use this to model immunopathologies? Maybe I can. If things get mixed up. So sometimes things which are on the right side are mistakenly considered safe. That gives rise to a lot of problems. Infectious diseases happen if you do not mount sufficient immune response against it. Cancer would happen. Immunodeficiencies would be part of that. Cancers would happen. What else? What else? What happens if I mount an immune response against my own body molecules? Autoimmune diseases. What about this one? Allergies or hypersensitivities, allergy to food, allergy to pollens, inflammation in the gut. And we also have sometimes teams try to destroy the entire entity. So this is going to be immunopathology. Again, modeling immunopathologies, simplified representation. So we have infectious cancer, infectious disease, hypersensitivities, and autoimmune diseases. And this last 10 minutes of the class, because you're not going to have another class after this. I have, but you don't. So I'm going to continue a bit for this. So I'm going to give you a quick review of the subfields of immunology. Fields. What is a subfield? Branch of immunology. So this part is called infectious disease immunology. Why infections are important? Because they have been with us for the entire history of human beings. This one is Black Death epidemics. What is the Arabic word for that?
Oh.
Well, okay, no, the translation for Black Death epidemic. Good, okay. Okay, so it was caused by plague, and this is a plague, plague that happened in 14th century in Europe.
10%.
Even more than that. So it was called bubonic plague. Bobo means cucumber. Cucumber. What is the Arabic word for cucumber?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's called taun khiyaraki in Farsi. All right. Why? Because it's transmitted by fleas, tiny insects that bite. The bacterium exists in rodents, in mice and rats. So it bites the rodents and then it bites my hand or my feet. And then lymph nodes become big. Lymph nodes become big, so big that they protrude, they come out like a tiny cucumber. All right. So, do you guys know about Genghis Khan?
Yes.
Mughal Empire. Mughal Empire. Okay. So there is a story behind Mongol invasion. So when they started, this is Mongolia, they started attacking almost 800 years ago to China. They captured China and then they moved towards the Iranian Empire at the time. So they came here. The city in here, it's called Neshabur, where I'm originally from. So it's 800 years ago. They let siege to Neshabur and killed all the people there. And then they came to the rest of the thing. So they went all to Baghdad and they kind of toppled the caliphate, the Abbasid caliphate, was through the books in the river. So that was one group of Mongols. The second group of Mongols that we haven't heard about, they went to the region north of the Caspian Sea, to current day Russia. And they went all the way to here. They captured Kiev. Where is Kiev? The capital of Ukraine. They captured Kiev. And in one of their battles, they went to Crimea. Okay, so that you hear about these days. There was a city in Crimea named Kaffa. And they led siege to Kaffa. So they gathered their troops around the city. But Kaffa was a port city and it had very big walls, so they could not penetrate. They continued the siege for one whole year until something very bad happened. What was the bad thing?
They threw cows and dead cows?
Taun or plague started to appear in the Mughal or Mongol army. And they knew it very well. This was a disease that was very well known to people at the time. So they took the news to the commander, told him that, okay, well, something bad is happening, or our people, our soldiers are getting plagued. So he says, okay, end the siege, we're going back. Because if we stay, all of us are going to die. They knew that it's contagious. But before we leave, we are going to do something nasty to the people inside the city. We are going to send to them the same problem that has happened for us. What did they do? You know, these are called catapults. Catapults. They put the corpses of the dead people and threw them inside the city. This is called the first bioterrorist attack in the history. Bioterrorism. So what they did, they threw them inside the city. The plague started, and then from Crimea, it went all the way to Europe. Almost in a matter of 4 years, the entire Europe was contaminated by plague, and 40 to 50 million people died. All right. So that was an example of a disease. This one is an example of another disease. It's called typhus. And this is Napoleon. His army was infected by typhus when they attacked Russia. And this one, the picture that I showed you before, smallpox. So this one is a disease that has its name connected with the history of immunology. Why? Because, well, it kills a lot of people, and it has been a major health problem for people over the centuries. So people came up with ways to protect themselves. I'll get to that. So these blisters, if the person doesn't die, they will dry out. So the scars will remain, and then you can scrape off the skin there. It's called the scraping of the crust. All right. So ancient Egyptians came up with this practice. They were scraping off the skin from surviving people, making like a powder and sniffing it. So if you sniff the crust from smallpox, two things might happen. You might die, or you get protected. And the chance of the second one was bigger. So they started doing that to protect themselves against. This was the first example of protection by immune response induction, vaccination. It was not called vaccination at that time. Chinese came up with the same practice almost 4,000 years ago. But Ottoman Turks came up with a better one. Instead of sniffing it, they were putting the crust at the surface of the skin. They were taking the powder, adding some water to it, then putting it at the surface of the skin and scratching it. Don't do that. This is too dangerous. You might die. Okay, so you put the crust, you make some solution from it, you put it at the surface of the skin and scratch it. So if you do that, small tiny vesicles might appear, but in most of the cases it would be safe and you would survive. They named it variolation. That was 3,500 years after that. This is 1,500. And then the British learned it from them. And they started variolation. But the breakthrough came with Edward Jenner when he did this. When he took the fluid not from the smallpox blisters, but from a similar disease in cows, and then injected people with them. So the disease in cows is named vaccinia. Cowpox, the Latin name for it is vaccinia. Hence the name vaccination. All right. So first Nobel Prize in medicine was not given to Edward Jenner. Why Edward Jenner did not get a Nobel Prize in medicine? What he did was huge. His contribution to medicine was huge. It started the age of vaccination and protected millions of people. Why he was not given the Nobel Prize? The Nobel Prize existed. The Nobel Prize started being given in 1901. Edward Jenner was 1877, so he was too early. سلام من کلاس یه 5-6 دقیقه. Okay, so this was the guy who received the first Nobel Prize in medicine. He's an immunologist or physician immunologist. Why? Because he came up with a solution for diphtheria. Diphtheria was killing children at the time. So what he did was he noticed that diphtheria is caused by a toxin, a poison that is produced by bacteria. So he took the poison, diluted it, gave it to horses, waited for a few days, took blood from horses, separated serum, injected children with it, and could protect children. This is not vaccination. Vaccination is when you activate my own immune system. This is antibody transfer. And later you will hear that this is called passive immunization. So we have immunization Immunization, we have two types of immunization. Active immunization is the same as vaccination. Passive immunization is what Behring did. Okay, what Behring did. All right. So this is infectious disease. I told you about. We have immunodeficiencies, genetic problems that cause basically lack of immune components like B cells and T cells, like this disease that you will hear about later, severe immunodeficiencies. And this is the story of a boy who had this particular disease. You have to live in a sterile environment like David Wetter. It's a bubble inside of it. It's a sterile. Water has to be sterilized. Food has to be sterilized. You cannot leave that place. And even if you want to change the clothes, you have go through these glove compartments. So the only solution for this is to live in a sterile environment and then receive a bone marrow transplant. So this is the story of a boy. These people are named bubble boys. You have to live inside, and it tells us how grateful we should be for having a functioning immune system. So when he was 8 or 9 years old, NASA made him a suit like what they make for astronauts, so everything inside was sterile. He could walk out of the bubble for the first time in his life. I can't imagine how difficult that has been. So David Wetter, and of course, well, later he received a bone marrow transplant, but unfortunately, that bone marrow was infected with EBV, and the child died after the bone marrow transplant. So it's a sad story, but it tells us how important it is to have a functioning immune system. Here we have cancer immunology. Two immunologists have received Nobel Prize for work on cancer, a very active field. We have two people in this department who work on cancer. Cancer can affect every part of the body. We have autoimmune diseases like this one. What is the name of this one in Arabic or in English? It's called vitiligo. Vitiligo, okay. The melanocytes are targeted. This is another autoimmune disease of the skin you will hear about. This is an autoimmune disease of the lung. This is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid gland. So everywhere in the body, diabetes type 1 is autoimmune disease. How about hypersensitivities? Allergies are a subtype of hypersensitivities. You get bitten by a bee and you have a severe reaction. You eat something and you have severe skin reaction. You have a drug and basically allergy, and it could be very severe, and other things like transplants, which are extremely important, like normal kidney, rejected kidney for heart, and the rest of the things. So we have infectious disease, we have cancer immunology, autoimmune disease, hypersensitivities, and immunodeficiencies. These are parts of what is called medical immunology. And you're going to learn about this in this course and the next courses. Basic immunology is this course. You will learn about some of these things. Is this the entirety of immunology? No. This is medical immunology. We have veterinary immunology. We have comparative immunology. We have computational immunology. We have systems immunology. So these are all different branches of immunology. The reference for this class, Cellular and Molecular Immunology from Abul Abbas. It has a summarized version for medical students. Well, it's not this one. It's not another version of this book. We also have this book by Matthew Hilbert, Immunology for Medical Students, but I encourage you to read Abul Abbas, and this is the book that you need to read for this course. And we have Farsi books by Dr. Vojgani, who is a faculty member in here. If you want to read it in Farsi, that would be good. End of the story. So I recorded this class just because of its importance. If you want, I can upload it somewhere on YouTube or on the web or give it to you. So this course is very important. Study well, study hard, read the book, participate in the class in discussions. If your language is not sufficient, work on it, because we don't know Arabic, you don't know Farsi, so English is the language, lingua franca in this class. We have to be able to communicate. And if you cannot communicate, well, it will be very difficult to learn. And I wish you a good immunology course, and end of the class.
Thank